I want to talk to you because you did show me that picture of a protester who, I mean, we haven't independently confirmed this, but appeared to be wearing a Hamas headband that we've seen in pictures of Hamas fighters.
Right.
And so when you see that, I mean, does that bring concerns? What concerns does that bring up for you?
I think this should really raise a grave concern, not just for me, for Israel, but for any American. This is not in this demonstration that we saw. Yes, we saw an individual dressed as a Hamas terrorist. We've seen in the past also in demonstrations outside our consulate, the Hezbollah terror organization flag being waved proudly. What does it mean when these demonstrators are proudly standing in support of terror? What does it mean for the United States? What does it mean when these terror organizations and their terror sponsor, the Iranian regime, they don't only see Israel as the enemy, they see America as the enemy. What does it mean when these demonstrators are in fact aligning themselves with terror and aligning themselves with those who are enemies not only of Israel, but of the entire free world, including the United States of America?
And I think you're absolutely right in that respect. But again, I have spoken to many demonstrators and activists who don't support or say they don't support Hamas, say they did absolutely condemn what happened on October 7th, their terrible attack on your nation. And yet they're saying, I have cousins, aunts, uncles, sometimes dozens of their family members have been, I mean, decimated in this attack. And they said they weren't fighters, they weren't fighters in this war. So, I mean, that has to be taken into account, right, when you're looking at these bombings.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would urge them to stand with us in wanting to see this war over. It should have been over long ago. It was so much suffering, so much suffering would have been prevented, not only from the Israeli side, but from the Palestinian side. We do not want to see civilians harm. We're doing everything that we can in order to minimize harm to uninvolved civilians, but that is the unfortunate reality of war, which is why those who don't want to see the suffering of the Palestinian people, they should be standing with us in demanding of Hamas to finally lay down their weapons and release the hostages. The war could be over today, should have been over long ago.
I think so many people would obviously agree with you that this war should have been over a long time ago. Now, but with the resumption, and like we talked about, there have been strikes now in Lebanon, other places in the Middle East. I mean, it seems like Israel just wants to continue to expand this war. Is that true?
Absolutely not. Yes, we have attacked in Lebanon because we just had rockets fired at our civilian populations in Israel. We cannot allow on our southern border, on our northern border, we cannot allow for terrorists to continue attacking our country and our people. No sovereign nation would allow for that. Yes, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, have the responsibility to act in order to respond and to see that we don't see such attacks against our country and people.
Yeah. Now, do you think, though, I mean, is there anything Hamas can do at this point to where Israel would stop and completely withdraw from Gaza?
It has to begin, and this has been made clear not only by Israel, but also by the U.S. administration, by President Trump, by his envoy. Hamas must release the hostages. They are still holding on to 59 hostages who have been languishing in brutal captivity for 533 days. And we know what they are going through because we have horrific accounts from hostages who have been released. We know that they are suffering torture and unbearable conditions in captivity. Yes, Hamas could and should release all 59 hostages. Hamas could and should lay down their weapons. And the Palestinian people could and should finally have a different kind of leadership. A leadership that is finally willing to accept the fact that Israel is here to stay. We have been open to peace since day one. Our Declaration of Independence in 1948 clearly states that our hand is extended in peace to all our neighbors, and we have seen peace become a reality whenever we faced a leader courageous enough to choose the path of peace over hatred.
Now we know, though, there was going to be this second phase of the ceasefire deal, but now it looks like that's very much in question now. I mean, do you see where Israel could come back to that table and do this second phase of the ceasefire deal that was originally being talked about with the U.S., and the U.S. was brokering that deal?
The last two proposals on the table, presented by U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff, Israel accepted and Hamas rejected. There cannot be a path forward.
And that called for, all the release of all the hostages, or is that another phased release?
That was another gradual, yes.
Okay.
With the idea of hopefully getting us to where we want to be, all sides. But unfortunately, we are facing a terror organization, and their interests are very, very different, not only from the Israeli interest or from the American interest. Their interests are different than the Palestinian people's interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with, like you said, that they could come back to the table, and you're saying this is a possibility to do this. Would there have been a way, though, to do this without resuming the bombing? Because a lot of people have seen these far-right elements in your government seeming to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu to continue the war, even though many other elements were calling for a continuation of the ceasefire. So is this about, like you said, getting rid of Hamas, or is this just pressure from these far-right elements of the government?
We saw for 18 days that Hamas was supposed to be negotiating. They were not negotiating. And they were using the ceasefire instead of to negotiate in good faith, instead of releasing the hostages, instead of agreeing to any proposal on the table. We saw them remain committed to rearming, regrouping, recruiting more terrorists. That is not a situation which the Israeli government, the Israeli Defense Forces can tolerate. Yes, we want to see a better path forward, but we cannot walk that path alone. We have a responsibility, and this is not just about this or that element within the Israeli government. We have a responsibility that any sovereign nation has to ensure the safety of our country and people. That safety is not ensured by seeing a ceasefire in place with no hostages returning, no negotiations happening, Hamas refusing to negotiate, and yet they continue all of their activities that are targeting, again, and dedicated to terror.
And so you're saying because you saw, part of this was because you saw them rearming,
Yep,
gearing up again,
and
that's why the government, the IDF...
Yes, moving back into spaces that they had been vacated from, in order to, again, reorganize and prepare for further attacks on Israel.
And obviously, like we've talked about, the concerns of people who are really worried about these innocent Palestinian civilians who have been killed in large numbers. But just with the Israelis and even people here who have families of these, like you said, these 59 remaining hostages, what would you say to them who see this as endangering the hostages by resuming these hostilities?
I fully understand and relate, and I think that every Israeli heart bleeds, really, since October 7th, and from the pain of knowing that we still have 59 of our brothers and sisters in captivity. That is not just a matter for the hostage families. It is a matter for every single one of us, because Israel and the Israeli society cannot begin to heal until they are all home. And I would say even more than that, no one with the basic humanity should be able to move on before they are all home. This cannot just be an Israeli concern. And there are American hostages as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I think I'm hearing that from, most people, like you said, maybe not the really extreme, but most people on both sides say they also want, the hostages to come back.
These are people that were snatched from their beds, in their underwear, in their pajamas, barefoot, snatched from, brutally dragged from a music festival They should not have been taken. They should not still be there. And I think that is a demand that really has to come. And we've heard it also from the U.S. administration. And we are grateful for President Trump's commitment to seeing the hostages released.
And you're right. The U.S. has said they support even the current Israeli actions, and the military actions in the government. And I think the last thing I'd like to ask you is, like you said, everyone can agree this war should have been over long ago, right? And I think some people maybe were surprised to see that Hamas was still kind of alive and kicking, right, when the ceasefire happened. Is there an end in sight here to this conflict? Because it does seem like it's now going to continue to drag on.
I think that ultimately there is always hope for a better future. And we have seen it in our region. We saw peace become a reality in our region. We saw it with Egypt in 79, with the Kingdom of Jordan in 94, and more recently with the signing of the Abraham Accords 4 years ago. Peace can become a reality, but it cannot involve a terror organization that is dedicated to the destruction of Israel. And the Palestinian leadership for decades has not been willing to tell their people the truth, that there will be no self-determination for the Palestinian people at the cost of the existence of the state of Israel. That is a reality that they will have to face. And the Palestinian people who have been suffering from a leadership that they deserve better. They deserve a leadership that finally dedicates itself to building a better future for the Palestinian people. They could have a better future. And it is also up to the international community to demand better and to hold accountable Palestinian leaders who, instead of caring for their people, are still dedicated to destruction and the glorification of death, murder, rape. That is not what will lead them to a better future.
Thank you so much again. Really appreciate taking some more questions there.
Thank you.
Yeah.